Good evening. Hope you're having a great week. It is Thursday, May 7th, 11:53 p.m. Central Daylight Time, local time here in Oklahoma City. We're going to talk about the global supply chain and the freight market. I planned on talking about this in my load board video that I uploaded earlier today, but I just got so involved in the load board that I didn't get around to talking about it. So no load board, no any of that stuff. We're just going to talk about the global supply chain. So let me say up front, for those, I know that the people who listen to pretty much every single one of my videos are mainly truck drivers that just listen. They don't watch the videos. They just listen to the videos while they're driving down the road. So, they will sit through a 4-hour long video while they're driving, just listening to it. But there are other people who are watching the video while they're, I don't know, waiting on a doctor's appointment or sitting at work in between phone calls or something. For those of you who have the short attention span, you're only going to watch like the first 5 minutes of the video. Let me just give you the outline of what I'm going to talk about, what I'm planning. I don't come into these videos with a script. This is completely improvisation. What I plan on talking about is what's going on in the war, what's actually happening in the war versus what the government's telling us and the state-run media is telling us, and what I think the impact will be. So the short version of that is the war doesn't look like it's going to end anytime soon. The Strait of Hormuz does not look like it's going to be completely reopened anytime soon. And the impact is likely, best case scenario, we're going to have a recession. And every day that this disruption continues, the likelihood for a depression increases. I suspect that the freight market is going to get really bad. We're going to have an extreme decrease in freight, and we're going to have really high fuel prices on top of that. I think we're going to have massive numbers of trucking companies going out of business. We're going to have store shelves empty. We're going to have desperate people. Lots of companies going out of business. We are likely going to see a stock market crash. And if we see a stock market crash, that will affect the banking system. We could see a lot of bank failures. Now, how bad this gets is going to depend on how long it remains closed. The longer it remains closed, the bigger the problem gets. The longer the disruption happens, the worse this problem gets. So what we could be looking at right now, if somehow through magic and unicorn farts, the Strait of Hormuz were to completely reopen tomorrow, which is impossible because they have to clear mines, which there was a Pentagon report that came out that said that it was going to take 6 months to clear the mines. So even if the war magically ended tomorrow, we would not see full traffic through the Strait of Hormuz for probably around 6 months. They would have to have traffic going through this narrow corridor that's not mined while the military goes in and clears mines for approximately 6 months. Pete Hegseth came out and said that that was just a preliminary estimate, and it's not likely going to take that long to clear mines. Who knows what's true? So, how bad it's going to get? Right now, I don't want to get too doom and gloom. I will get pretty doom and gloom later in this video. I think there's a possibility that things could get really, really, really bad. But let's try to be realistic and look at more of the hope for the best scenario instead of plan for the worst. So, on the brighter side of things, I think that we're going to have a recession. I think that's like a best case scenario is a recession at this point. A recession is just simply like flat or negative growth for, I think it's 2 out of 4 quarters, 2 out of the last 4 quarters of flat or negative growth. I think that's the technical definition of a recession. Let's see. But a recession basically, if you're not talking about the technical definition, a recession is basically a slowdown in the economy. It's, the economy getting bad. In economics, a recession is a business cycle contraction that occurs when there is a period of broad decline in economic activity. Recessions generally occurred when there is a widespread drop in spending. This may be triggered by various events such as financial crisis, an external trade shock, an adverse supply shock, blah, 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 blah. There is no official definition of a recession according to the International Monetary Fund. In the United States, a recession is defined as a significant decline in economic activity spread across the market, lasting more than a few months, normally visible in real gross domestic product, real income, employment, industrial production, and wholesale retail sales. The European Union has adopted a similar definition. I'm trying to find the definition that's. Oh, here it is. Recessions in the United Kingdom are generally defined as 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth as measured by the seasonally adjusted quarter-on-quarter figures for real GDP. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, an international organization, defines a recession as a period of at least 2 years during which the cumulative output gap reaches at least 2% of GDP, and the output gap is at least 1% for at least 1 year. So anyway, there is no consensus definition for a recession. A recession in general terms just basically means, a negative economy. A depression is basically a long depression. A recession is something that's a short-term economic downturn, and a depression is a long-term economic downturn. Now, there are definitions out there, as you just saw. Lots of places have definitions of recessions and depressions, but there's no consensus definition. There's no one single definition for a recession or a depression. So a recession is basically just short-term economic downturn, and a depression is a long-term economic downturn. I think best case scenario right now is that we go into a recession. And every day, the likelihood of a depression gets higher. Now, when is this going to happen? Because most people think in terms of today, tomorrow, next week. Oh, Sivster said that we're going to go into a recession. That was like a month ago, and there's no recession. So let me be specific on time scale. Because people, they think in short terms. I think long term. What the disruption is that we're dealing with right now, it's at the very beginning of the supply chain. You're talking about oil, which gets turned into fuel and petrochemicals. You're talking about gas that gets turned into all kinds of things. It's used in manufacturing. They make fertilizer with natural gas, nitrogen, urea, stuff like that. The disruption that we're experiencing in the Strait of Hormuz is like raw resource disruption, like at the very, very bottom of the supply chain. We're talking about extraction of raw resources and distribution of raw resources. That's the very foundation of the supply chain. It takes weeks, months, in some cases years, for something to go from raw resource to a consumer at the end of the supply chain. So it could take a very long time for us to see the impact of this disruption. Now, there has been impact that's already happened. There was impact within the first week over in Asia. There were countries in Asia that were having fuel shortages that went on like fuel rationing within the first week of this happening. So there are some impacts that are going to be, felt and, really quick, but some impacts are going to take a long time. Like food. One of the things that you're hearing people talk about is we're about to experience a famine because of this. Well, how long is that going to take to happen? Well, farmers have already gotten their fertilizer and their fuel and everything for this growing season. They just planted recently, or they're in the process of planting. So that food is going to take a few months. So this fall, we're going to be harvesting that food. That food is not going to have, we're probably going to see price increases, but we're not likely to see shortages of food this fall. Now, whenever they plant in the fall, they're going to have really high fuel prices, and they're going to have really high fertilizer prices. And there's probably not just going to be price increases, there's going to be shortages as well. Like they're not going to be able to, even though fertilizer is expensive, they're just not going to be able to get all the fertilizer that they want. So let's say that they can only get 70% of the fertilizer that they need. Are they going to, grow the same amount of, product over the same acreage and get 70% yield? Or are they only going to plant 70% of their acreage? They're most likely only going to plant 70% of their acreage, because you're going to get roughly the same crop yield no matter what. But if you plant everything, then your cost goes up. It's like looking at it from the perspective of a truck driver. Imagine that you're going to get paid $5,000 to haul this load. And you can either haul it 700 miles or 1,000 miles. You're going to get paid the same no matter what. If you only haul it 700 miles, then you only have 700 miles worth of expenses. If you haul it 1,000 miles, your expenses go up, but your profit doesn't go up. You're still getting $5,000. Why would you haul the load 1,000 miles and increase your costs? Your wear and tear on your truck, your fuel cost, all your expenses go up, but you don't make any extra money. So farmers are likely only going to plant like whatever percentage of crops they're able to get fertilizer for, which is really bad. And that gets, the whole farmer situation. I recommend, I don't want to spend an hour talking about that. I'm not an expert on the subject. I have just the most basic of understanding. But a lot of people have a misunderstanding about industrialized agriculture. They don't understand how dependent on resources like chemicals, like fertilizers and pesticides. A lot of people don't understand how dependent industrialized agriculture is on all of that stuff. People think that you can just go throw seeds out there on dirt and it becomes food. That's not the way industrial agriculture works. To put it in really simple terms, whenever industrial agriculture started using fertilizer, what it did was it severely increased crop yields. Because it's like giving these plants steroids, and they suck more nutrients out of the ground when you give them fertilizer. So after you use fertilizer, whenever you plant next time, if you don't use fertilizer, the next crop is going to be lower yield than normal because of all the nutrients that were drained out of the soil. So now you're having to use fertilizer just to get normal crop yields. That is, industrialized agriculture with fertilizer is like a drug addict. At the very beginning, you get amazing results. You're growing 50-pound tomatoes. But over time, you need the drug just to be normal. That's what industrialized agriculture has gotten to with all of the chemicals that they use to grow food. And that's just one small piece of this puzzle, is agriculture and farming. But we're not likely to see a disruption in the food supply until probably early next year. We're probably about a year away from seeing food shortages. Now, there are some farmers who did not, pre-purchase their fuel, pre-purchase their fertilizer, and they are being impacted right now. So there is going to be some impact on the food supply in the next couple of months. But the majority of the impact on the food supply is likely going to be next year, next spring, somewhere in that ballpark. What about freight market? When is the freight market mainly going to be affected? We might not see a significant downturn in freight volume probably until the first quarter of next year. The last quarter of the year is generally the busiest quarter in trucking because of holidays, holiday purchases. People buy tons of shit for holidays. Thanksgiving, Halloween, Christmas, all of that is in the last quarter of the year. And there's a lot of extra discretionary spending. Throughout the year, people spend money on things that they need and their routine. And then in the last quarter of the year, people are spending extra money. That's the reason the last quarter is so busy, is all the holidays. This holiday season is likely not going to be that awesome because people aren't going to have as much discretionary spending. This at the end of this year, where we're usually the busiest in trucking, it's probably not going to be that great. It's probably going to be mediocre at best because a lot of people are not going to have the discretionary spending that they normally have because of the high fuel prices and the high food prices. Fuel prices are going up, food prices are going up, fuel and food are going up, and the prices of a lot of things are going up. And that reduces discretionary spending because people have to spend more money on, food and fuel and things that they have to survive. So I don't think that the freight market is going to start a significant downturn. I think it's going to start a downturn this fall, but it's going to be offset by the normal increase in freight volume that we see in the fall. So it's not going to be a really big downturn this fall. I think the really big downturn is going to happen first quarter next year. That's when we're probably going to see a really, really significant downturn in the freight market. And fuel prices are likely going to continue going up. We're probably going to see a slow decline in freight volume over time as fuel prices go up. And then we could see a significant drop in freight volume first quarter next year. The first quarter of the year is normally the slowest period for freight. And you tack that on to other things that are all going to start impacting around that time. And it's just going to make that first quarter really, really, really bad. And I think we're slowly going to go into a recession, and we have the possibility to go into a depression. So we're likely going to see, why is the freight market going to have a downturn? Why do I think that's going to happen? We're going to see businesses laying people off. We're going to see a lot less discretionary spending. what is discretionary spending? So let's say that somebody has $500 extra dollars per month. You know, of all the money they make in a month, they have $500 extra every month. And they can spend that on video games, going out to eat, going to the movies, things that they don't need to do. Just things that they do for entertainment, for fun. If the price of food, the price of fuel, the price of utilities, if the things that they have to spend money on go up, then that discretionary money goes down. So let's say that their discretionary money goes from 500 down to 100. They're not buying more products with that $400 that disappeared. That's not $400 more freight moving in the economy. They're still getting the exact same amount of stuff that they were getting before. They're getting the same amount of fuel, so we're not moving any extra fuel. They're getting the same amount of food. We're not moving extra food. They're getting the same amount of electricity, the same amount of natural gas, the same amount of this, that, all these resources. So we're not moving any extra resources with that $400 extra dollars they're spending on those resources. But that's $400 less dollars that they're able to spend on discretionary stuff, like going to the movies, buying video games, going out to eat, stuff like that, buying a TV, buying a new game console. So that's just $400 less that's spent on products. And that's just one person. Think about that on a scale of billions of people. It does not take a big reduction in discretionary spending to have a massive impact on the freight market. If we see like a 5% reduction in discretionary spending, that is massive in the freight market. But what we're likely to see is a massive reduction in discretionary spending because of extremely high increases in food and fuel costs and also energy costs. I just got an email from Oklahoma Gas and Electric, OG&E. They just sent an email out to all their customers saying that they have petitioned Oklahoma to increase prices on oil and gas, or not oil and gas, but gas and electric. Now, Oklahoma limits, because the oil and OG&E is a monopoly in Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma controls the pricing. So OG&E, if they want to increase prices, they have to get approval from the state, which is what they're trying to do right now. Other states don't have those price mechanisms in place. They allow these monopolies, these power companies, these energy companies that have monopolies over the infrastructure, they allow them to just price at whatever the hell they want. So people that live in places like that, where the energy companies can just do whatever pricing they want, they can see massive price increases in a short amount of time. We saw this in Texas. I'm not sure what their pricing mechanisms are for energy in Texas, but whenever Texas has these Arctic blasts, I've seen reports of people having, utility bills that are going from like a couple $100 to a couple $1,000 in a month over whatever pricing mechanisms that they're using in these in Texas. Like Texas has some really crazy utility pricing mechanisms. But yeah, some places the utility prices fluctuate wildly. Because Oklahoma has controlled pricing, the state controls the pricing. We don't see wild fluctuations in energy prices, in utility bills in Oklahoma. But anyway, discretionary spending is going to drop dramatically because of these price increases. We're also going to have product shortages. There's just going to be fewer products moving around because of supply chain disruption. So we're going to see a shortage in the freight that's moving because of a reduction in discretionary spending. And we're going to see a reduction in freight moving because of a shortage in just products. If we have a semiconductor shortage or a circuit board shortage, then there's going to be fewer memory chips or fewer computer boards or fewer of this product or that product moving around. There's going to be disruptions throughout the supply chain for these products. So we're going to be seeing fewer of them moving around. So there's a lot of things that are happening. This global supply chain disruption, I'll try to talk more about that in a minute, about how this has a cascade effect. I'll try to, give an analogy of how that works. But the two main mechanisms that are going to cause a reduction in freight volume are a reduction in discretionary spending due to high cost of living increases, and a reduction in products moving due to just product shortages. Just a second here. Is this, it looks like the video is lagging a little bit. I think there might be a process on my computer that's locked up or something. Let me pause the video for a second and check on something. All right, I don't see anything using a lot of resources on my computer. It might have just been my imagination. It looked like it was dropping frame rate. I completely forgot what I was talking about. We'll try to get back on track. So anyway, discretionary spending and supply chain disruption, just fewer products moving around the supply chain because of resource shortages. One of the things you've heard about is helium. We have a helium disruption because of the Iran war. And helium is required to make circuit boards. Circuit boards are used in almost everything. There are things that you use that you don't realize it has a circuit board in it. Pretty much every electronic device has a circuit board in it. But even things that you don't think are electronic devices, like a fan. If you have a little toggle switch on a fan, most likely there's a circuit board in there. There are products that you think are mechanical, but there's a circuit board in them somewhere. Just for power, almost anything that uses power, there's going to be some kind of circuit board in the power mechanism. So if we have an issue with circuit board creation, then a shortage in circuit boards, that's going to ripple through the entire economy. If we have a shortage of plastics, which is a petroleum product, then that's going to have a ripple effect through the economy. Imagine that milk is in plastic jugs. Imagine that the dairy farm just can't get enough milk jugs. So they have all this milk that they cannot get to market because of a lack of milk jugs. Think of everything that you buy in a grocery store that's in plastic. What about, parts that, are in plastic containers? They ship them in plastic containers. Just think about ordering 50 bolts and it comes in a little plastic container. If they don't have that plastic container, they can't ship the bolts out. They have to come up with something new. And, it could take time. It could take days, weeks, months for them to find something else to put those products in to ship them out. It's not something that typically can be corrected in a short amount of time. We had this problem when we had the lockdowns. When we had the lockdowns, for milk in particular, let's use milk as an example. During the lockdowns, most people get their food from restaurants. A lot of people, they don't shop at the grocery store and cook their own food at home. A lot of people, especially in what would be considered first world countries like the United States, they buy pre-made food. They buy food, they eat out. They get deliveries. They buy things that are pre-made. So milk that's sold to restaurants is sold in different containers than what is sold at grocery stores. So a big problem that we had with the lockdowns was people were consuming the same amount of milk, but the dairy farms didn't have enough gallon containers for like grocery stores to put the milk in, because a lot of their milk that they send out goes in larger containers that are to, restaurants and things like that were shut down. That's just a little tiny example about how a shortage of plastics can affect something. Just a container for a product. Anything used in the manufacturing or distribution of that product, if anything comes up short, it's going to disrupt the ability to get that product to a consumer. So we don't necessarily need to have a shortage of alternators. If we have a shortage of something that's used to manufacture that alternator or move that alternator or get it to market, anything in that product that comes in that supply chain that comes up short will affect the ability to get that alternator to market. We'll talk more about that in a second, but that's what I'm talking about. We're going to see a reduction in freight volume due to a reduction in discretionary spending and a reduction of products in the market due to shortages and disruptions. On top of that, we're going to have really high fuel prices. I think the fuel prices are going to get much higher than they are right now. The fuel prices have been manipulated. That manipulation is likely to end. So I talked about this earlier. Since like day 2 of the war, we've seen market manipulation by President Trump. He's been coming out and saying that the war is going to end tomorrow, and we've completely annihilated Iran. Iran's defeated. He's been manipulating the oil and gas market by doing that. And he's been doing that like every day or every other day, every couple of days since the war started. And it has kept the oil and gas prices suppressed. If he hadn't been doing that, oil and gas would be like, oil prices right now are around $100 a barrel. They would be $150 to $200 a barrel right now if Trump had not been manipulating the markets. And that market manipulation that's been going on since the war started is likely to end. Why is it likely to end? Because there's a lot of investigations going on right now about market manipulation. There's a lot of speculation about insider trading based on Trump's market manipulation. Trump can, because he's the president of the United States, when he makes a statement about the market, it has a huge impact on the market. And there have been some really bizarre trades that have happened right before really massive statements that he's made. And there has been a conspiracy theory that there's some insider trading going on. And just a couple of weeks ago, that conspiracy theory became a reality. They arrested, I think it was somebody in Army Special Forces, otherwise known as the Green Berets, that was involved in the kidnapping of Maduro, the leader of Venezuela. Supposedly, he made some really big stock market bets. It might have been a Polymarket bet where you can bet on anything in Polymarket. I'll talk more about that in a second. But he made some kind of bets, either in the stock market or Polymarket, or I don't know what gambling it was. But he had insider information and made bets on it. And he is now, I think he's in jail right now for insider trading. And there are a lot of investigations going on about some really weird bets being made. Some weird insider trading happening. To give you another example on Polymarket, there was some really big Polymarket bets. There was like a really massive bet. Let me pull up an article so I'm not just like giving you my bad memory of it. Polymarket bet Trump Praise Allah. All right, there are a bunch of articles that are saying that this was not true. But all of these not true articles are coming from one source that is, I've seen several false debunks by Snopes. Snopes is not a trustworthy source of information. They go out and claim people lie about stuff all the time. And it's very biased. And a lot of times it's not true. They are using the same like wild ass guesses, the same wags that they claim that they're trying to debunk whenever they're debunking stuff. They'll just make generalized, they're not fact based. So we'll say that may or may not have happened, but there's been some really weird bets made like that. Like, let me just do insider trading because there's been large bets on the oil markets and stuff like that right before Trump's announcements. So let's get a news article on it. Grand Theft Oil Futures. I'm just going to read the headlines, which the headlines are typically created by editors. They're not made by the people who write the articles. And the editors will typically put in clickbait headlines that sometimes have nothing to do with the article. But we'll go through the articles here. I don't want to spend like hours reading through just this one little tiny snippet. But Grand Theft Oil Futures, that's one headline. Here's another. Epic insider trading. Nearly $1 billion in crude oil shorts taken just before report of U.S.-Iran peace deal. Here's another. The insider trading suspicions looming over Trump's presidency. Next. Trump's inauspicious defense of a soldier accused of insider trading on Polymarket. So it appears the soldier I was just talking about a few minutes ago, this article is talking about that. It was a $400,000 bet on Polymarket, according to this article. Here's the next headline. U.S. probes suspicious oil trades made before Trump-Iran pivots, source says. Here's another article. This is most of these articles I've been reading are over the last few days, but these articles are like 2-3 weeks ago. U.S. probes suspicious oil trades made before Trump-Iran pivot. Here's another one. Traders placed over $1 billion in perfectly timed bets on the Iran war. What is going on? And here it's claiming that there are 413 million bets worth over $100 million that are possibly involved in, that are possibly being affected by insider trading. So people are losing up to, they're saying on Polymarket, there's up to $100 million being lost or affected by insider trading. There's been a lot of reports about this for a couple of months about these massive like market purchases or bets being made right before a really big announcement by Trump that completely changes the direction of something. So what has happened recently, like there's been talk about this conspiracy for a couple of months. What's happened recently is they've actually started legal proceedings. They've started investigations into this. So what we're probably going to see is a reduction in Trump manipulating the market. So just a second, I need to cough. I'm going to pause this. All right, now we're going to drink a little bit of tea. The throat's drying out. So the point I'm trying to make is that Trump has been manipulating the oil and gas, the financial markets, and it has been artificially suppressing the prices. If he had not manipulated it, it would probably be at $150 to $200 a barrel instead of $100 a barrel right now. And that manipulation is likely to get toned down significantly because of all of the legal stuff that's happening involving insider trading. So Trump is most likely going to be told or advised to, back down on the rhetoric of the market manipulation. Otherwise, he might get caught up as being like an accessory to insider trading. He himself may not actually be doing any insider trading, but people he knows that he's giving information to before the announcement may be involved in insider trading, and he could get caught up as an accessory in that insider trading if he has any knowledge of it. So I suspect his legal advisors are going to be telling him that he needs to pump the brakes on the market manipulation, and hope this all blows away without him getting indicted, without him getting impeached. So yeah, we're likely to see him reduce the amount of market manipulation he's doing, and that's gonna stop the suppression of the oil prices, of the oil and gas prices. Like right now, Trump's been like holding this balloon underwater, and he's gonna slowly let his hands off of it, and it's gonna skyrocket. So we're probably going to see a significant increase in oil and gas prices over the next couple of months, and less market manipulation by Trump. Also, the markets are probably going to stop believing Trump at some point. I mean, I don't know why they haven't stopped believing him yet. It's crazy that, like, it's been like around 2 months of constant lying by Trump, and the markets are still, like, every time he says something, it's having massive movements on the market. I don't know why in the world they still believe him when he says the war is going to end tomorrow. I don't know why they still believe him when he does that. But when he does that, it still has a big impact on the markets. So anyway, we're likely to see a large increase in fuel prices over the next couple of months. So a reduction in freight volume, an increase in fuel prices, it's going to get really, really bad. And like I said earlier, I think the best case scenario is a recession. But as this goes on, the possibility of something worse happening increases. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that for a second. How does this problem compound? So let's just take a step back and look at this from a big picture perspective. Let's not look at anything in particular. Let's just look at big picture perspective. Let's say 20% of the global supply chain is being disrupted, which it's somewhere in that ballpark. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. somewhere in the ballpark of 20%. If we have a small supply chain disruption over a short period of time, then that's something that can be corrected. A large supply chain disruption can only happen for a really short period of time in order for that to correct. If we have a large supply chain disruption happen over a long period of time, that's something that is really hard to correct. It can get to the point where it's impossible to correct. You can get into feedback loops. What in the hell does that mean? So if we have a 20% supply chain disruption, there are going to be products that are not going to be manufactured. There are going to be products that we have in limited supply. And those products are used in other things in the global supply chain. And that's going to limit their capacity. And that reduction is going to slowly trickle through the global supply chain. Now, if that disruption does not last for a long time, or it's not a really big disruption, then eventually those places will get what they need and they will go back to normal production levels. Everything will eventually go back to normal. But what happens when you have a large disruption, like 20% of the global supply chain, and it's happening over a long period of time, months? Well, what happens then is you start having, instead of disruption, you start having failure. And failure tends to lead to more failure. You have cascade failure. And you can get into feedback loops where one place that's dependent on another place has failed. And they're codependent. Maybe not directly codependent, but indirectly codependent. So this place needs this place in order to function. And likewise, that other place needs the other place to function. And if both of them fail, or one of them fails, if one of them fails, it will cause the other to fail. And then how do you get the whole thing started back up again if they both fail? That's the type of cascade failure and feedback loop that we risk happening in the global supply chain with this type of large-scale, long-term disruption. Let's give an example. Let me try to think of an example of something that might potentially have a feedback loop. What are two different industries that are codependent? Give me a couple of minutes to think about this. I'm going to pause the video. It's 12:43 a.m. right now. Let me pause the video so you don't have to sit here and listen to silence. Let me just ponder this for a second. I want to think of a good one. I don't want to, I don't want to do like solar panels. Like, solar panels are not required. They're not a necessity. I want to try to think of something that is core to the global supply chain. I want to think of a good one. So give me a second. All right. I didn't want to sit here for 30 minutes trying to think of it, so I decided to just use ChatGPT. It's 12:46 a.m. I'm going to show you what ChatGPT said. Now, just a disclaimer on ChatGPT. It's called artificial intelligence, but it's not artificial intelligence. The term AI that's used to describe LLMs large language models, it's a marketing gimmick. It's a marketing term. There's absolutely zero intelligence involved in these LLMs. For them to be called AI, that is purely a marketing term. It's a marketing gimmick. The term AI has been misused by marketing so much with these LLMs that they've come up with a new term to describe AI. They call it AGI, artificial general intelligence. So these LLMs, they are just programs that operate off of a set of data. That's it. That's basically how every program works. These are nothing new. These LLMs, these little chat programs, these are things that people have been making for fun for decades. I remember when I took a QBasic class in the 1990s in high school, we made chat programs like this for fun, where you would just do a whole bunch of if-and statements, where you could sit there and talk with it, and it would mimic a real person with its responses. It would, it would do keyword. It would trigger off of keywords, and it would do randomized responses based off keywords. Like you could ask it what time it was, and it would reply back with, a response of what time it was and stuff like that. What happened was they found a use for this. They said, oh, this could actually be used for something other than fun. So they started dumping a whole bunch of resources into the development of these, programs. And it has, widespread uses and a lot of possibility, but it's still extremely flawed. It gives responses, and this is a problem that we see across social media. You'll see this isn't just an AI or an LLM problem. This is a problem with people in general. You'll have people that have no idea what they're talking about, and they will state something as fact. I have people do this in the comment section all the time. They'll come in and they'll state something as fact that's just not true. But these chat GPT, these LLMs, pretty much everything that they say, they state it as fact. And a lot of times it is not fact. So I just wanted to give that disclaimer before I start reading some LLM. I really hate that they call it AI because there's zero intelligence to it. And a lot of people think that it is like intelligent, like it's coming up with its own responses. So whenever they ask it, some political question, and it comes up with some, political response that's really far left or really far right, they think, oh, well, we have a neutral party here that's telling us that, the Democrats are right or that the Republicans are right. No, it's not a neutral party. It's programmed to say that. That's the way it's been programmed. That's the data it's been told to use. So whatever response you're getting out of the program is not a neutral, like third party. It's a reflection of the way it's programmed and the data set that it's using to come up with its responses. So if it is using like some really far left or really far right data, then it's going to have a really far left or really far right response. Anyway, let's see what the chat program says. So the question that I asked, the question that I posed, I said, can you provide an example of two industries or manufacturing that are dependent on each other? I'm trying to find codependent supply chain nodes that could cause a feedback loop if one of them failed completely due to supply chain disruption. And ChatGPT comes back and says a strong example is the semiconductor industry and industrial chemical production. Example 1, semiconductors and industrial chemicals. Semiconductor manufacturing depends on ultra pure neon gas, hydrofluoric acid, photoresists, high purity silicone wafers, specialty fluorinated gases. Chemical manufacturers depend on semiconductors for PLCs and industrial control systems, sensors, power electronics, variable frequency drives, industrial automation hardware, logistics, and refinery control systems. This creates a circular dependency. Semiconductor fabs need specialty chemicals and industrial gas production. Chemical plants need semiconductors to maintain and expand production capacity. If semiconductor production collapses, spare control hardware becomes unavailable. Automation systems fail over time. Chemical production degrades. Reduced chemical production then further damage semiconductor manufacturing capability. This is a delayed positive feedback loop with inventory lag buffers. Another example, I'm not going to read through the entire example. That was the entire example of semiconductors and industrial chemicals, two different industries that are codependent. This is another example that the chat program came up with. Electrical grid equipment, mining, and metals. Another example is agriculture and natural gas. How is natural gas dependent on agriculture? So it says that natural gas is dependent on agriculture because of food supply for workforce stability. So I guess, I mean, that is true. If the workers can't get food, then, you know, they're going to stop working. But that would be an extreme situation. I think we would run into bigger problems before we got to that feedback loop. Agricultural biofuels. So natural gas is dependent on agricultural biofuels. But there are alternatives to that, so I don't think that is a hard dependency. Rail and trucking systems supported by agricultural products. There's alternatives to that. They're talking, I think they're still talking about biofuels, like diesel biofuels. But it's possible to have diesel without biofuels. Chemical feedstocks partially derived from agriculture. So mainly the chat program is making the argument that the fertilizer production industry, the supply chain around fertilizer production is so large and so complex that if we have any disruption to the food supply, it could cause disruption in the production of fertilizer, because you have to extract a whole bunch of products like nitrogen and natural gas and urea and all these things. You have to move them around. You have to do this. You have to do that. And then it eventually becomes fertilizer. So if you have a disruption in the food supply, all of those people involved in the massive process of getting fertilizer to the farmers, then that can cause a disruption in the amount of fertilizer. And that reduces the amount of food the farmers can make, which further reduces the amount of fertilizer we can make. And it's a slow burn. It's a slow, gradual reduction on both sides. And it eventually will hit a breaking point. But that's something that would happen slowly over a long period of time. So then in summary, it says the most dangerous real-world systemic loops usually involve energy, semiconductors, transportation, industrial chemicals, electrical infrastructure. These are keystone industries because many other sectors cannot bootstrap without them. A useful system concept here is tightly coupled high centrality nodes. Centrality. Tightly coupled high centrality nodes. In network theory, these are nodes with high dependency degree, low substitutability, long recovery times, high capital intensity. Those characteristics make a cascading failure and nonlinear feedback much more likely. Nonlinear feedback would be basically it means indirect. So it's two industries that are not directly dependent on each other, they're indirectly dependent on each other. So it's a non-linear, and it's using a term here. Where's it at? Bootstrap. So let me explain what bootstrap means. Bootstrap is a term that if you work in the information technology industry, you are familiar with the term bootstrap. Bootstrap is basically like a core startup sequence. So what it's saying right here is these are keystone industries because many other sectors cannot bootstrap without them. So without energy, without semiconductors, without transportation, without industrial chemicals, without electrical infrastructure, what it means is if you have any of these systems shut down, then other systems cannot start up without them. You cannot build an oil refinery if the transportation industry is shut down. You can't build an oil refinery if the semiconductor industry is shut down. You can't build an oil refinery if the energy industry is shut down, or industrial chemicals, or the electrical infrastructure. If any of those keystone industries are shut down, you can't, like, almost nothing can happen in our civilization. Now that is a potential reality, but it's way, way, way down the line. These are like really big catastrophic failures. So this type of feedback loop, this, what's the term that the LLM used? Real world systemic loops. No. Tightly coupled high centrality nodes. A node pair. It seems to just be using a lot of the same terminology that I gave it. So, these are like, for that kind of stuff that the LLM was just talking about to happen, those are worst case scenario type things. Those are things that can happen with this supply chain disruption. Because with 20% of the global supply chain being disrupted, what happens at first, and let's go back over here to just me. What happens at first is you have elasticity in the global supply chain. You have reserves. You have inventory on hand. So you don't have failures happening immediately. You have minor disruptions that happen immediately. Some major disruptions, like within the first week, we had fuel shortages. A lot of that was due to panic buying, though. It wasn't actual supply chain issues. It was just panic buying. Panic buying and reselling exacerbates supply chain problems. So whenever we have a supply chain issue and people find out about it, it's going to be like exponentially increased whenever we have panic buying and reselling. That's the reason the government is not telling everybody what's going on. They're not telling everybody how bad this is. So, we have this 20% supply chain disruption, and it's going to cause, first, elasticity in the system. There's a certain amount of time with a certain amount of disruption that elasticity, it can stretch. The supply chain can deal with that, and then it can slowly come back once that disruption ends. But if the disruption is big enough or goes on long enough, or in the situation that we're dealing with, where we have a really big disruption and it's also going on for a long period of time, this is a worst case scenario. This is a massive disruption, 20% of the global supply chain. I know that, like I've already talked about this. I know that they're portraying this as 20% of gas at the gas station. It's not 20% of the gas at the gas station. It's 20% of the global supply chain is shut down. That's massive. This is probably the largest disruption to the global supply chain in the history of the world. So we have a large disruption, and it's also happening for a long period of time, and there's no end in sight. It's looking like this is going to last for a minimum, an absolute minimum of 6 more months. It's looking like it could last a lot longer than that. And we're not talking about just the Strait of Hormuz. This is a whole other thing that I was planning on talking about that I haven't touched on yet, is we're not just simply talking about a disruption to the Strait of Hormuz. We're talking about infrastructure that's been bombed. We're talking about oil depots, oil refineries. I'm not sure if pipelines have been destroyed, but the pipelines have been bombed. So you're talking about production facilities that have been destroyed or significantly damaged, storage facilities, refinement facilities. These are things that take years to rebuild. Reopening the Strait of Hormuz doesn't fix this problem overnight. We have years of disruption that is happening. Ukraine is in the process of bombing. Let me pull up a news article on this. Ukraine, Russia, oil. So this is from 5 days. I'm just going to read the headlines. Let's flip over to this. I'm not going to read through the whole articles. Let's just look at the headlines. This is from 5 days ago. Ukrainian strikes hit key Russian oil infrastructure, including Shadow Fleet tankers. Here's another article on the same thing. Ukraine hits key Russian oil loading port and 3 Shadow Fleet tankers. Here's from 3 hours ago. Ukraine's military reportedly strikes Russian oil refinery defense technology center. This is 6 days ago. Ukraine is hitting oil facilities deep inside Russia. Soaring fuel prices could blunt the impact. 19 hours ago, drone strikes, deep strikes, how Ukraine's long-range drones. Ukraine tried to attack Russia's Kirish oil refinery, governor says. That was 3 days ago. 20 hours ago, Ukraine said it hit major oil refinery deep inside Russia. These are just the latest articles on this. This is something that's been constantly happening in the Russia-Ukraine war that the mainstream media does not talk about. Russia is one of the largest oil and gas exporters in the world. And Ukraine is targeting their oil and gas infrastructure. So we have a major oil and gas disruption happening with the Russia-Ukraine war. And we also have a major oil and gas disruption with the Israel-Iran United States war. It's not just the Strait of Hormuz. It's also the actual infrastructure itself that's being destroyed. It's also the ports, the transportation vehicles, like the ships that carry the oil. These massive oil tankers, a lot of them have been destroyed. You're talking about things that have been damaged or destroyed that are going to take years to rebuild. So just reopening the strait, and you can't just reopen the strait because it's been mined. The mines have to be cleared. And we had that report come out from the Pentagon that said it's going to take about 6 months to clear the mines. This is not a problem that's going to be resolved anytime soon. So we have this large problem over a long period of time, and the longer it goes on, the more things in the system break. Think about it like this. Think about it like, let's say your salary is $1,000 a month and your bills are $1,000 a month. You don't have any extra money. Or let's say that you have, $100 a month of extra money. So you make $1,000 a month and you have $900 a month in bills. Well, what if something happens? You break somebody's window and you have to pay for the replacement of that window. And they charge you, they say, okay, you can pay it, it's going to cost $500 to replace that window. So you pay them $500. You have to pay it all right now. You pay them $500. So now you're short on your bills. But you have $100 of extra money every month. It's going to take you 5 months to be able to pay all that back. So what are you going to do for that 5 months? Well, you're going to pay bills late. That's your only option. Or maybe you have a credit card. So let's say you have a credit card. Let's say you have a credit card. So you pay the $500 on credit. Well, let's say you give them your $100 extra and then you pay $400 on credit. Well, now you have the interest on that money. So you have to pay back this money and you have to pay back the interest. Now you can eventually pay all this back, but it's going to take you, several months to pay all this back and pay the interest that you're paying on that loan on your credit card. But you can pay it back. You can make it happen. Well, what if instead of, this one time, this short duration disruption to your financial situation, what if it's a long-term, large problem? What if it's $200 a month for the next 3 years? That's not something you can just fix with your credit card. If you have a debt, an unexpected debt that comes up that's $200 a month for the next 3 years, then you're going to be $100 in the hole every month for the next 3 years. There's only so long that you can go without paying your electric bill before they shut it off. There's only so long that you can go without paying your property taxes or your house insurance or your mortgage payment before you get evicted. So, short-term or small problems, there's elasticity. But the longer the problem goes on and the bigger the problem is, the more failures that you have. And those failures lead to other failures. And in this situation that I just described, you're going to end up homeless. You're going to lose your job. You're not going to be able to afford gas to get to work. You're going to have issues getting to work. It's going to affect your income. You're going to have hygiene problems because you're homeless. You're going to get fired. The problems just keep compounding and getting worse. And it's not linear. It's not like it just slowly moves in this direction. There are thresholds that you pass where things just completely shut down. And that causes a huge increase in the disruption. And then that slow burns for a while. And that eventually crosses a threshold where you have another complete collapse of something. And that causes a huge increase in the disruption. And then that slow burns. And it just keeps compounding. That's what we're looking at. That's the Mad Max scenario. That's the worst case scenario of what could potentially happen with this. Is we could cross some thresholds where we have major disruptions that could cascade in it. This could cause a domino effect that gets to a point where we can't fix it. Our global supply chain is extremely fragile. Whenever they started selling globalization to the world back in the late 80s, early 90s, this is not a Republican or a Democrat thing. I remember it in my early childhood. The first time I remember globalization being preached to us was the first George Bush president. He referred to it as the New World Order. Bill Clinton was really big on globalization, Democrat president right after George Bush. So the Republicans and the Democrats both are pushing for globalization. And the selling point that they were using on globalization was that it would increase resiliency and redundancy in the global supply chain. No longer would you be, without milk if your local dairy farm went out of business. Now you have access to the global market, so you can get milk from anywhere in the world. That's the way they sold it to the people. But that's not reality. That is like utopian ideology. That's theory. That's like theoretical bullshit. It doesn't make any sense. What actually happened with globalization is the opposite. We did not have an increase in resiliency and redundancy. We had a decrease in resiliency and redundancy. Why? I mean, this is not rocket science. If you don't have globalization, then you're dependent on local resources. So every region has to have their own local resources. Well, whenever you have globalization, you're no longer dependent on local resources. You can get a product from anywhere in the world. So you can buy your beef from China. So that puts like cattle farmers in your area out of business. You can buy shoes from China. That puts shoe manufacturers out of business in your area. So what happens with globalization is you start to see everybody go out of business and you start to see mega companies take over. You start to see a consolidation of resources where there's only like one place in the world that makes semiconductors. There's only one place in the world that makes memory for computers. There's like only a couple of places in the world that manufacture this product or that product. So you have these points of failure where if this one place fails, it affects the entire world, where the world is dependent on one single location. Taiwan is one of the most critical nodes in the global supply chain. And because China has said that they're going to take over Taiwan, the United States has been trying to build semiconductor. Let me find an article on this. There's been a process that's been going on for several years to move semiconductor production to the United States. What? Taiwan rejects demand to shift semiconductor production to the United States. What is this? I think we've been building semiconductor plants in Arizona. What is this? Taiwan said that it's impossible for them to move production to the U.S. So Chang in Taiwan said that Taiwan's semiconductor ecosystem, which has been developed over decades, cannot be moved. She said, I have made it very clear to the United States that this is impossible, referring to the 40% target proposed by the United States. Despite rejecting these demands, Chang assured that Taiwan's semiconductor industry will continue to grow and invest domestically. The U.S. Commerce Secretary has stressed the need to bring semiconductor production back to America. He said you can't have all semiconductor manufacturing 129 kilometers from China. He also revealed his goal for the current administration is to achieve 40% market share in leading edge semiconductor manufacturing. So, what I was looking for is an article on All right, so here's an article from February of this year. 9 major semiconductor plant projects underway in the United States. The semiconductor industry is undergoing a massive transformation, and the United States is at the center of this shift. Fueled by the CHIPS Act and the urgent need to secure domestic chip production, several leading global and U.S. companies are investing billions in new fabrication plants. These facilities, some among the largest industrial projects in recent U.S. history, are reshaping local economies, driving construction demand, and creating high-tech infrastructure at an unprecedented scale. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, wow. So the first two plants it was talking about were like $4 and $5 billion. Micron is building a $100 billion mega fab in Clay, New York. And it's not going to become operational until 2030. And it's not expected to fully complete until 2045. It's expected to take 20 years to build this facility. This is the problem that we have with supply chain disruption, is that our technology is really hard to make. It takes an incredible amount of resources, an incredible amount of time, an incredible amount of knowledge and skill to be able to manufacture our leading technology. Like right now, if something like if a tsunami were to wipe out Taiwan, if there was just some massive tsunami that just destroyed Taiwan and destroyed all of the semiconductor manufacturing in Taiwan, the repercussions from that would be hard to describe. I don't know if we could ever recover from that. Our civilization might like it might. So there have been times in human civilization where technology has been lost and technology has regressed. If something like as simple, Taiwan is a really small island off the coast of China. Let's go over to the map. Where are we at? Should be in this area somewhere. All right, is this it right here? Is it? I think it might be this island right here. Why is it not giving me the country names? Oh, wow. No, no, no. It's way over here. I'm looking in the wrong spot. There it is. I thought this was China. This bulge right here. I thought this bulge right here was China. I was like, where is it at? It should be right around here somewhere. But no, no, no. It's down here. This bulge down here is China. This is Taiwan. So this small island nation, I mean, it's a decent sized island. But if they had some kind of catastrophe happen here, a massive tsunami, a massive earthquake, which this area is prone to tsunamis and earthquakes. If this, if something were to happen to the semiconductor manufacturing in Taiwan, it could cause our technology to regress. It's like what the LLM was talking about a minute ago. Keystone industries that are dependent on each other to build each other. Like, you can't bootstrap without them. You'd have to start all over from the beginning. Like, imagine building a semiconductor plant whenever you don't have a semiconductor plant to build semiconductors. Like, you would have to start out the way that it was originally built. It started out at a low stage and it built its own semiconductors, and then it used those semiconductors to build more, and it slowly evolved over a long period of time. You'd have to go through that entire process again. But I don't think that the only semiconductor manufacturing is in Taiwan, but that is one of the linchpins of the global supply chain. That's one of the linchpins of our advanced technology for our civilization. This is probably, the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most critical points for our civilization. This being disrupted is detrimental to our civilization. Another place is Taiwan. Taiwan is also a key point for our civilization. Disruptions to the global supply chain in Taiwan would be detrimental to our civilization. It would have catastrophic repercussions. And the same with the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz, being disrupted right over here, is also catastrophic to our civilization. It will have detrimental impacts, massive impacts to our civilization. There's several places in the world that are like that. And like the Strait of Bab el-Mandab right here, I wouldn't say that it's on the same level. It's close. But this is another critical point right here. If this gets shut down, now if that Strait of Bab el-Mandab gets shut down, then that's not as bad as the Strait of Hormuz being shut down, because you can still go around it. You just have to, instead of going through there, you have to go all the way around Africa. So you can go both directions. You can go this way around Africa, and you can go this way around Africa. It's not like the Strait of Hormuz where these ships can't get in or out of here. It's completely shut down. You can't get in or out. It doesn't completely shut down the supply chain through here. It just disrupts it. It slows it down. It increases the travel time by like 2 weeks or something like that, or a month of extra travel time to go all the way around Africa instead of just going through this strait and this canal, the Suez Canal right here. What's going on right now in the world? There are conspiracy theories that this is all a planned event for depopulation. There are groups of people in the world that have ideologies, belief systems that we need to reduce the world population significantly. They have different ideas of how many people need to exist in the world. There are groups of people who feel that the world population should not exceed 500 million human beings. We're somewhere around like 8 billion people right now, 8 or 9 billion. Let me pause this for a second. All right, sorry, I forgot to unpause it. Not sure exactly what I said. It's around 8.3 to 8.4 billion. We're not sure, somewhere in that area. That's a huge population reduction. And there are people in positions of power that believe that the world population should be like 500 million. And they do things to try to make that happen. Now, there's a conspiracy theory that what's happening throughout the world right now is an attempt by extremists, people with radical ideologies, to depopulate the planet. Because what we're seeing right now looks like a coordinated event to disrupt the global supply chain and disrupt food production. And there are a couple of more things that could happen to escalate this even further, the Strait of Bab el-Mandab, right here, this being shut down, and China attacking Taiwan. If those two things happen, like what's happening right now is unprecedented. This is the largest supply chain disruption in history. But there's still some other things that could happen that could cause this to be much, much, much worse. Anyway, I could keep going on and on and on about this, about the potential things that could happen. Let's go back down to what is happening. I want to try to wrap this video up, but before we wrap it up, let me go off on one little tangent over here. One more speculation about something. One of the potential things that could happen with this war in Iran is we could see another missile attack, a large-scale missile attack against infrastructure in Iran. The Trump administration was making threats for a few weeks about wiping out Persia, about wiping a race of people off the face of the earth, about destroying a civilization. He's talking about Iran and Persia. And a lot of people thought, is he talking about nukes? He was not talking about nukes, because he was also saying that he was going to knock out their power grid. He was going to destroy their power infrastructure. Every study that I'm aware of that's been done on what the implications would be, what the outcome would be, what the effect would be in the event of a large-scale, long-term power outage, they all came to the same conclusion. At least 90% of the population would die within 6 months to a year. Now, in a place like Iran, that it's not as much of a desert as like Saudi Arabia, but Iran is not a place that's easy to live. You could see more than a 90% population reduction over 6 months to a year in Iran. But 90% is enough. Like 90% is enough. That's how dependent human beings are on our advanced technology. You cannot have 8 billion human beings living on this planet without industrialized agriculture and a global supply chain. The planet just cannot support that many people without our technology. If we were all living like off the land, we all had our own farms, that we were growing all of our own food, we couldn't have 8 billion people on this planet. To support one single human being requires a certain amount of land. Let's see how much land is required to support one person. A lot of this is just really bad information, because it requires technology. They're talking about, oh, one person can live on, like 1 acre of land. Yeah, with advanced technology, like if you have hydroponics and this and that, and you have fertilizer, and you have grow lamps and electricity and all this stuff. Yes, one person can grow enough food. So they're saying um, this is an LLM response, so you take it with a grain of salt. Um, it's saying like you can live on a quarter of an acre, but it's also contradicting itself like two sentences later, and it's saying, well, for long-term survival, you need 2 to 5 acres. But it looks like it's pulling information from very biased sources, people that are trying to promote self-sustainability, and they're like, "Oh, you can live on as little as 1 acre of land if you do this." That's the reason these LLMs are not very good, is because the data that they pull from is not very good. But let's go with 5 acres. All right, I don't know how accurate this is, but they're saying the total farmable land in the United States is about 875 million acres. That includes cropland, pasture, and woodland, representing about 39% of all land in the United States. However, cropland specifically, which is used for growing crops, is closer to 390 million. So we can't deforest everything. So let's go with a happy medium. Let's say 500 million acres. Let's say 500 million acres. Is that 50 million? So that is 100 million. So in the United States, just doing some, like, this is not scientific, this is not highly accurate, but in the United States, and these numbers are probably, this is probably an overestimation. The numbers are probably lower than this. So this is like, if we're being extremely optimal and using every square inch of growable land, and everybody is being extremely efficient, if everybody is maximizing efficiency, everybody has their own 5 acre plot of land, then the United States can support 100 million people. It would take coordination to have that level of efficiency with land. Most likely without some type of organization, which would also require additional resources, you would be lucky to get half that. So the United States could maybe support 50 million people, would be my best guess. And that would still be unlikely. That would still require a lot of efficiency on the part of the people. 50 million people living in an agrarian society, the United States might, maybe, be able to support around 50 million people. How many people do we have in the United States right now? We don't know. We have so many illegal immigrants. We have tens of millions, maybe over 100 million illegal immigrants in the country. We don't know how many people we have. How many people live in the U.S.? 342 million. As of early May 26th, the United States population is estimated to be 342 million people, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Other sources estimate the population closer to 349 million. I think the population of the United States could easily be upwards of 400 million. I think there's a lot more people here illegally than people realize. So, like, that's the level of population that we have versus what the land can support without, advanced technology. We are extremely dependent on advanced technology. So if you start disrupting the global supply chain, we are very susceptible to this kind of stuff. So let's go back to what we were talking about. So Iran, we are threatening to knock out Iran's power grid. You knock out the power grid, and human beings cannot survive. You're talking about genocide. And Iran said that if that happens, if the United States attacks their power grid, knocks out their power grid, they will retaliate by attacking the power grids of all the Gulf Coast countries that are helping the United States and Israel, and also Israel. Israel is within missile range. So you're talking about a massive genocide in the Middle East if that takes place. If all the power grids in the Middle East get knocked out at the same time with escalation in this war, that would be a supply chain disruption. Well, first of all, it'd be a massive genocide, but then on top of that, it would be a supply chain disruption that would be hard to quantify. And the other likely outcome, if that were to happen, if Iran knocked out the power grid to Israel, Israel would likely retaliate with nuclear weapons. And who knows where that would go. But that is a very possible scenario because the United States has been threatening to do that. The United States is desperate. They want the Strait of Hormuz reopened, and they're trying to figure out a way to make it happen. The only way that I think that they can make it happen is with a ground invasion of Iran. But for us to do a ground invasion of Iran, we would have to spend weeks, possibly months, building up forces in the region, setting up infrastructure to support those forces, moving supplies into the region, and then we start the ground invasion. And Iran, the terrain of Iran is like a natural fortress. Look at the terrain on the map here. You look at Saudi Arabia and Iraq and all these places, and it's just one solid color. These places are fairly flat deserts. And then you look at Iran, and it's extremely different than Iraq and Saudi Arabia and all these other places. The terrain is vastly different. Iran is very mountainous. You zoom in here, and it's just everything. It's just tons and tons of mountains. Iran is just one massive mountain range. It's a natural fortress. There are choke points everywhere. There are limited places where you can move troops into the country. So for us to do a ground invasion of Iran, not only would it take an extremely long time just to do it, it would likely take a long time for us to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, and then it would take an even longer time to win the conflict. I think we could probably open the Strait of Hormuz before we defeated Iran, but it could take a couple of months to reopen the Strait of Hormuz after we invaded Iran. And then the invasion of Iran could last for several months or years. It could be another forever war. I think that's the only realistic way we're going to get the Strait of Hormuz fully reopened. But it appears that the United States government is trying other options. They're trying diplomacy. They're trying the blockade. They recently tried just escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz. They called it Project Freedom or something like that. And they were going to start escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz with destroyers. And I think Iran started firing at the destroyers, and they canceled Project Freedom. And Trump made up some more BS, and he said, well, I decided to call off Project Freedom because, I'm going to give diplomacy, another chance. So Trump claimed that he chose unilaterally to end Project Freedom, the escorting of vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. That's not what happened. He claims that he chose to stop it. It was his decision so that he could, give diplomacy another chance. No, it's something that we tried and it failed. This is the same crap Trump always does. He extends an invitation to the sports ball team out of California that won some sports ball championship to come visit the White House, which is normal. That's, what happens. Presidents invite sports ball teams to the White House if they win a championship. And then the sports ball team says, we don't like you, we're not going. And he's like, I rescind the invitation. You can't come to the White House. I don't want you coming here. You can't come here. And he tries to make it out like he told them they couldn't come. That's not what happened. They refused the offer, and he turns it around and says that it was his decision, and he's not letting them come. That's the same kind of crap he's doing with Iran. He keeps trying to do stuff. It fails. And then he changes the narrative to make it sound like he chose to, stop doing that because he's such a nice guy, or because he's, given a piece of chance, or whatever crap he's making up. This is the lies and propaganda. That's the reason I'm making this video, is because there's so many lies, so much propaganda, so much misinformation. If you don't understand what's going on and you're just listening to the bullshit, you have no idea what's going on. Because what they're telling you is going on is not what's going on. So what it appears is happening, not based off what they're saying, but what they're doing, is it appears that we are preparing for military options with Iran, but we're trying other things, because other things will take less time. A blockade could potentially take less time. Now, Trump said the blockade was going to destroy Iran within a couple of days, because Iran was going to run out of places to store oil within 2 days. That was not true. There were a lot of experts that came out right after Trump said that, and they said Iran has at least a couple of months of storage. At least 1 to 2 months of storage, not a couple of days. And there was a news article I just read that there was a Pentagon report that came out, or some kind of intelligence report that came out, that said Iran can last at least 3 to 4 months on this blockade. So it appears that Trump was advised that this blockade would completely destroy Iran within a couple of days or a week or two. And now he's finding out that that's not the case. So then he started this, freedom, whatever he's calling it, snow cone unicorns. And that failed. So what I'm seeing, not what I'm hearing, not the propaganda, but when you look at what's actually happening, I'm seeing desperation. I'm seeing we really want this Strait of Hormuz reopened, and we're trying a lot of different things, and we're failing. We're just throwing crap at the wall and seeing what sticks, and we're trying to avoid a ground invasion. Ground invasion is the last resort, way over here. But that is a very, very, very big option. You really need congressional approval to do something like that. It's going to take more than the 60, 90 days that the president the War Powers Act gives the president. It's something that's going to cost a lot of human life. It's going to cost a tremendous amount of resources, and it's not going to resolve the problem for several months, possibly years. But it's the only thing I can think of that's a definite solution to the problem. I don't think diplomacy can solve this problem. Iran sees this as a victory for them. They think that they're winning because everything's going according to their plan. I mean, they're getting their butts kicked, but that's their plan. And they see this as victory. So the diplomacy that we're doing with Iran is basically terms of surrender. Iran is wanting to continue their nuclear program. That's something that they're not willing to negotiate on, even though we keep hearing propaganda from the United States saying that Iran is negotiating the nuclear program. We are not hearing anything. I have never heard Iran say that they are negotiating the nuclear program. The only source of information I've ever heard in which the nuclear program is being discussed is from the United States. I have heard one rumor that the one meeting they had in Pakistan with Vice President J.D. Vance, the rumor that I heard was that the Iranian delegation started negotiating about the nuclear program, and someone in the delegation reported back to the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who's in control of Iran right now, that the delegation was discussing the nuclear program. They were negotiating on the nuclear program. And that was supposedly, that was on the list of items that were not up for negotiation, according to the IRGC. And once the IRGC were told, they recalled the delegation. They told them to immediately come back to Iran. And they canceled the talks once the IRGC found out that they were negotiating the nuclear program. And that's the reason the talks abruptly ended. That's the rumor that I heard. Now, the rumor that the United States put out was that, Iran came in there with demands instead of, negotiate. Instead of coming in to negotiate, Iran just showed up with demands, and the United States said that they weren't going to waste their time, and so they left. That is the propaganda that came from the United States. The rumor that came out from Iran was what I just said about the IRGC recalling their delegation because they were negotiating things they weren't supposed to. The IRGC got really mad at the politicians because they were not supposed to be negotiating certain things. They had a list of things that were non-negotiable, and they were not following the rules. I'm more likely to believe the IRGC side pulling them back than the bullshit that we're getting from the United States. Because it doesn't make any sense. The United States had basically been begging Iran to negotiate, to make a deal. And Iran finally agreed to talk to the United States. And then the United States is just going to throw a temper tantrum, grab their ball, and go home in the middle of negotiations. That doesn't make any sense. But that's what the United States is claiming happened, is that they begged Iran, who initially would not even talk to the United States. They begged them, and Iran finally agreed to meet with the United States and have some discussions. And then less than a day, like 21 hours into the negotiations, the United States just says these people are unreasonable and storms off out of the place. That is the United States propaganda. It doesn't match up. It doesn't correlate with reality. If you look at what's happening versus what they're saying, reality doesn't match up with what they're saying. So it does not appear the IRGC is in control of the country. They think they're winning. They're not willing to negotiate nuclear. They're not willing to negotiate Strait of Hormuz. Their version of reopening the Strait of Hormuz is them having control over the Strait of Hormuz for the rest of perpetuity, and them charging a toll for ships to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. That is their version of reopening the Strait of Hormuz. And that is going to be a disruption to the Strait of Hormuz. Yes, we will see an increase in the flow of traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, but it'll be a permanent disruption. That's not acceptable. That's not going to fix the problem. So diplomacy does not appear to be an option while the IRGC is in command. While the politicians in Iran do want to make a deal, but they're not in power. I read an interview with one of the politicians in Iran that was part of the delegation that's negotiating, and he said in the interview that he feels that basically the Iran, the IRGC, is overplaying their hand. They think they have more leverage than they do, and they're just not willing to negotiate. That's what the politicians are saying in interviews, is that they think that they should make a deal with the United States. They have a lot of leverage right now, and the IRGC is just not willing to negotiate on anything, and they're overplaying their hand. That's what the politicians are saying about the IRGC. So the politicians want to make a deal. The IRGC does not want to make a deal. And the IRGC is in power. They're the ones controlling everything. So I don't think diplomacy is going to work. There could be some kind of major change in the leadership structure of Iran, and diplomacy might become an option if that happens. But I don't see any mechanism right now where there is going to be a shift in the leadership in Iran or a change in their attitude. I don't see anything to project that as a possibility, a realistic possibility. I see nothing that's pushing in that direction to make that happen. So diplomacy doesn't appear to be an option. The blockade is not going to work. You're dealing with people who are irrational. It's not going to work. Pressuring an irrational person into doing something is not going to work. Only a rational person folds under pressure. Irrational people, they're not thinking clearly. Even the politicians are saying the IRGC is not thinking clearly. They think they're winning. They think they have all the leverage. And they don't really care about the people suffering. And the blockade is mainly the people suffering. They don't care if the power infrastructure, the power grid gets knocked out. Like, the Trump made the threat to do that. He gave them a deadline. He told them when he was going to do it. And Iran was like, well, when you do that, we're going to fuck you up. Sorry for the language. But that's like the response that you got from them was like, it's like, imagine setting out somebody's house, outside their house, and you have a wheelbarrow full of explosives, and you're like, I'm going to blow up your house in 1 hour. And they're just sitting up there, looking at you out their, window, drinking a beer, and they're like, well, when you do that, I'm going to kick you right in the nuts. That's what's happening with Iran right now. And the United States sat there and played that card up until the deadline, threatening to blow up their house. And Iran was just like, do what you got to do. Nuts are getting kicked if you do it. And then, it's like a game of chicken. And Iran is irrational. You're not going to win a game of chicken against an irrational person. So the United States, Trump he waited until the deadline, and then he's just like, we're going to give peace a chance. He just made up some crap, claiming some sort of victory, and that he made the decision not to do this because he's going to do something else that's better, and it's beautiful, and it's great, and it's amazing, and these are beautiful people, and peace is great, and open the fucking strait. You know, and in case you don't get that reference, it's um, Trump lost his cool on Easter Sunday, and the facade dropped, and he blurted out on social media to Iran. He said, "Open the fucking strait" on social media. So the United States is putting out this perception that the Strait of Hormuz doesn't matter. You know, none of this matters. You know, we're just going to sit back and pressure Iran. They'll eventually give up. We've defeated them already. And then Trump loses his cool and snaps and says, "Open the fucking strait." That is what you're seeing happening. Is all of this is just it's a facade. It's just window dressing. It's fake. The Strait of Hormuz being closed is catastrophic to the global supply chain, and Trump is probably being briefed on that multiple times per day. And they're trying to put out the propaganda that everything's fine, everything's great, you know, this doesn't matter, everything's awesome. But in reality, this is a catastrophe. This is cataclysmic. This is going to have massive repercussions for decades. We're going to be dealing with even if everything gets resolved right now, if we have a peace deal with Iran and the Strait of Hormuz completely reopens tomorrow, we're going to be dealing with the implications of this supply chain disruption for decades. We're still dealing with the repercussions of the lockdowns that happened, 6 years ago? We're still dealing with the repercussions of that. This is a much bigger event than the lockdowns. We're going to be dealing with this. And even if this is what I said earlier, even if the Strait of Hormuz reopens right now, we still have infrastructure that's been physically damaged or destroyed that's going to take months or years to rebuild. So even if there weren't mines in the Strait of Hormuz and traffic could start flowing through the Strait of Hormuz, we have oil tankers that have been damaged or destroyed. We have oil depots, ports, refineries, distribution, like lots and lots of infrastructure that's been damaged or destroyed that will take months or years to fix or replace. And that's not just in the Middle East, that's also in Ukraine and Russia. The Ukraine-Russia war has no end in sight, and it is escalating with infrastructure damage to oil and gas. It's global supply chain infrastructure. So this is a problem that is getting worse by the minute, and it's compounding. And we're hearing from experts that there are certain thresholds. Let me see if I can find an article on this. There's so much propaganda going on. It's hard to find articles about what's going on. If you go and search for something like supply chain, if you do a search in the news on supply chain, it comes up with a whole bunch of like articles about how to make your supply chain better. It's basically advertisements and stuff like that. They're intentionally suppressing negative information about the supply chain, which means that this video is probably going to be suppressed down because their little chat LLM that does voice to text and then searches the video to see what it's about is going to put this video over into the bucket of stuff that they don't want to promote. So even people that are subscribed to the channel won't get recommendations on the video. They won't even see it. That's common. Like if I make a video about a topic that is being suppressed, then I will get almost no views on the video. People will have to go out of their way to find my video. It won't show up in their recommendations, even if they're subscribed. They might not get alerts on the video. All kinds of stuff. All right, what are we looking for? We're looking for None of these articles are like, I try to do a very specific search and it's still coming up with stuff like um, hidden supply chain factors that can derail business strategy. That's the very first result that shows up. This is crazy. Like, this is a level of suppression of information that's hard to wrap your mind around. It's not showing up with any of the, like, I'm doing very specific searches and it's not showing up with anything related to my search. It's just, it's like asking a politician a question and they give you an answer for the question that they hoped they were asked. That's the type of search results I'm getting. This is crazy. But this just reminded me, there's some AI stuff. Data breach disrupts exams at Rutgers University. I'm doing searches on supply chain critical disruption, and that's the type of search results that I'm getting. Is, oh, these kids, had their exams disrupted because of a data breach. You pesky children. That's the kind of stupid results I'm getting. But this reminds me, there was an AI. I saw something about AI in here somewhere. And it reminded me, AI is the latest and greatest boom. It's the big thing to invest in. We had the dot-com bubble in the late 90s, or throughout the 90s. Right now, we're in an AI bubble. That, AI, these LLMs are the big investment. These LLMs are not profitable. They require investment. They're currently a Ponzi scheme. If they stop receiving investment, they will cease to exist. They need a constant flow of investor money coming in. They are spending insane amounts of money. They are building data centers all over the place. I just saw an article where there's like 2 more data centers being built in Oklahoma. Oklahoma already has the largest Google data center in Pryor, Oklahoma. That's what the people at the Guard Shack told me. The last time I was there, I said, man, this place is enormous. I said, I think this place might be bigger than the one in the Dalles, Oregon. And they said, we were told that this is the biggest one that Google has. This is the biggest site that they have. So the people at that site in Pryor, Oklahoma, the people at the Guard Shack, which I'm not sure how informed they are on things, but they told me that they thought that it was the biggest Google data center. At least in the United States. I'm not sure about in the world. But they're building like 2 more data centers in Oklahoma. These data centers use massive amounts of resources, and they're mainly used for these LLMs. These LLMs there's such a massive boom in these LLMs that they're buying so many electronics, so many computer products, it's caused a memory shortage. NVIDIA, one of the largest manufacturers of video cards in the world, came out last year, I think it was last year, and they made a statement saying that they weren't going to produce very many or any of the latest generation of video cards because of a memory shortage. All of these LLMs are buying up the fastest, most advanced memory. And what NVIDIA is doing is they're re-releasing older technology that uses slower memory because there's a shortage of memory in the world because of these LLMs. That's how insane this, what they call AI bubble, is. It is absolutely crazy the amount of resources that are being dumped into this. There are cities that are having water shortages because of all of the water that these data centers are using for cooling. I think they're using evaporative cooling to save money instead of using just a standard air conditioner. They're using some type of evaporative cooling, like a swamp cooler, to save money. And it uses massive amounts of water. And there are cities near these data centers that are complaining about water shortages because of these data centers. That's how resource intensive these things are. It's absolutely crazy. These are the type of things that are susceptible to any kind of disruption in the global supply chain, the global economy, the financial markets. If we start to see the financial markets have a downturn, then really risky investments like LLMs, AI, are going to be one of the biggest affected sectors in the financial market. Money is going to move over to safer investments. LLMs are insanely risky investments. It has a huge potential for, it's a huge risk, huge reward. And when the financial markets start going down, whenever we go into a recession or a depression, money is going to move into safe investments. You're going to see money move into like money market accounts, bonds, things like that. They're going to move into companies that have been around forever, like General Electric or, stuff like that. Things that people are dependent on, things that aren't just going to go away, things that aren't just pure fiction and fantasy. Like LLMs don't make any money. They make very little money. Yes, you can get a subscription to an LLM. They do make a little bit of money, but their expenses are far greater than their revenue. They are. Let me see if I can find an article. I think OpenAI is like $500 billion in debt. SoftBank seeks $10 billion margin loan backed by OpenAI shares. Nope, that's not what I'm looking for. Microsoft's $440 billion wipeout and investors angry about OpenAI's debt explained. That was 99 days ago. All right, let me take a peek at this. A sharp sell-off in stocks on Thursday underscored investors' exhaustion with the new spin. Blah blah blah. This is just talking about Microsoft stock going down by 12%, which wiped out $440 billion. Here is one little snippet of information about OpenAI. OpenAI has made about $1.4 trillion in commitments to procure both the energy and compute it needs to fuel its operations. But its revenue barely crossed $20 billion in 2025. So it does make money, but its expenses are insane. It is really far in the hole. Let me find an article. So I'm finding articles that say that OpenAI's partners are taking on $100 billion in debt. OpenAI's suppliers are carrying $96 billion in debt. Now, this is not the total debt of the company, but they're saying that SoftBank, Oracle, and CoreWeave have taken on approximately $96 billion in debt to support OpenAI's operations. So these are business partners that are supplying products to OpenAI, and they're taking it on loan. They're supplying these products without getting paid for it. Let's try another website. This is not giving me the information I'm looking for. Yeah, it's a complex question. I don't know. It's not easy for me to. Like here is somebody saying that OpenAI is $800 billion in debt due to many factors. They're looking at their debt obligations and this and that, and they're saying that they're about $800 in debt right now. $800 billion in debt. That is crazy. So I don't know for sure exactly how far in debt OpenAI is, but that's just one of these LLMs, one of these marketing term AI companies. Why are people dumping so much money into that stuff? They're dumping money into it because they think it's artificial intelligence. And they think whoever is the first person to cross the certain threshold with artificial intelligence, whichever company does that first, will rule the world. And they want to, ride that wave as it goes up. We don't know if it's possible for us to develop artificial intelligence. These LLMs are not remotely close to artificial intelligence. They're nothing like artificial intelligence. Even though we have people coming out all the time and saying that, man, I'm really scared. I worked on these LLMs and they're really smart and they're intelligent, and we think that they're already, are intelligent right now. And you have people coming out, these supposed whistleblowers and these people doing this fear crap, this doom and gloom, but it's not like none of these LLMs are remotely close to artificial intelligence, but they're perpetuating, certain people are perpetuating this myth that it's already intelligent or that it's just really close to intelligent. That's the reason people are dumping so much money into it, is because they think it's artificial intelligence and they think it's, on the cusp of becoming artificial intelligence. None of that is true. Just a second here. Let me pause this while I refill my tea with my tea jug and take a drink. My throat's drying out. All right. Anyway, let's enough ranting about it. The reason I'm talking about it is because it is one of the massive bubbles in the world. It's one of the biggest bubbles in the world right now in the financial markets. And it's also an economic bubble. You have all of these companies that are providing products to these AI companies for like some future payment that they know they can't pay. So what happens whenever these AI companies go bankrupt? It is going to cause devastation to the financial markets and the economy. Think of all of these industries that are propped up right now because of these AI companies. These AI companies are buying massive amounts of electronics, insane amounts of electronics. They're building massive complexes. I mean, the construction materials, everything to build all this stuff. The trucking industry is moving a lot of loads because of these LLM data centers. And you could just keep going through like the financial system, the economy, the banking system, several different industries, you know, the IT industry, the trucking industry. The list goes on and on and on and on and on and on of everything that's affected by these LLMs. And if we start to have an economic downturn, if we have a stock market crash, these LLMs are going to be at the very top of the chopping block. They're going to be one of the things that's most affected. It was like the dot-com bubble. Whenever the stock market started going down at the end of the dot-com bubble, when it burst, everybody sold out. Everybody sold everything. And people were afraid to reinvest back into technology companies, website companies and stuff like that, Googles and Yahoos and places like that. People were afraid to invest in them because of the massive losses, the massive sell-off that occurred. That's what we're probably going to see with these AI companies, is we're going to see a massive sell-off in these AI companies. And these AI companies are Ponzi schemes. As soon as the investment money starts disappearing, they don't make enough money to support themselves. They're going to go out of business. They're going to go bankrupt. And all of their lenders are just going to have to eat those losses. So think about Oracle and whatever those other two companies are eating billions of dollars in losses. Think about the banks that are loaning money to these AI companies, taking billions of dollars in losses. Think about all of these, IT companies that are selling computers and stuff to these places. All of those purchases are going to stop, and a lot of the products they've already delivered were probably purchased on credit or loans of some kind, and that money is going to get defaulted on. So that revenue stream is going to end, and on top of that, a lot of the products they've already, supplied to that, they're going to have to take losses on it. So this is going to, that's just one little sliver of the supply chain, the economy, the financial markets, that is probably going to be largely impacted in the near future. It's, when I say near future, I don't mean the next week or two. I mean the next year or two. The next couple of years, we're probably going to have a stock market crash, and the AI bubble is going to burst. And these AI companies are going to go out of business. These data centers, like all these data centers in Oklahoma, are probably going to get shut down. It's going to, there's a lot of possibilities. And I think the best case scenario is the economy's going to slow down. Everything's going to, slow down. The stock market's not going to crash. The stock market's going to come down. we're going to see some layoffs. We're going to see some business go, some places going out of business. We're going to see the economy take a downturn, but it's not going to be catastrophic. I think that's best case scenario, is that we just have like a normal little recession. Every other scenario is much worse than that. And we could cross thresholds where we start to have cascade failures, not just downturns, but complete collapses and failures in industry. And that could get really, really bad. But anyway, this video is 2.5 hours, so let's go ahead and wrap this up. What I'm recommending is get out and run your ass off right now. Now is the time to haul freight. I know that a lot of people are probably thinking that this is the time to sit at home. This is not the time to sit at home. These fuel prices are not that bad. Yeah, it sucks, but you can still make money right now. 6 months from now, you may not be able to make money. You may be reflecting back on, this moment right here thinking, man, I wish I'd have gotten out and run my ass off back then. I wouldn't have made a lot of money, but I would have made money. So, yeah, I don't think there's a scenario where things are not going to get bad for the freight market by approximately first quarter of next year. It might happen a little sooner than that. But first quarter of next year, that is when I'm predicting the freight market's going to get really bad. First quarter of next year, first quarter of 27, about 6 months from now is when I think the freight market is going to get really bad. It's most likely going to progressively get worse until we get there. That is best case scenario, in my opinion. There is the possibility that we could have some additional escalations, some more supply chain disruptions, which could cause, this to happen faster or for it to get worse. So best case scenario, in 6 months, we're going to have a really bad freight market. Like, the freight market already sucks. We're already in a bad freight market. In 6 months, it could get catastrophic. Like, lots of trucking companies going out of business starting in about 6 months. So that's the point of this video, is to just try to provide something to contradict the propaganda that's being spewed to us. Because if you're just listening to the narrative coming from the politicians and the state-run media, then you think the complete opposite is happening. So that's the point of this video, is to you need to know what's going on in the world to be able to make business decisions. I know that there's a lot of owner-operators that just act like they're employees. They have no idea what's going on. They don't understand how the freight market works. They don't understand the economy, the financial markets, the industry. They don't understand anything. They're just out there hauling loads like a company driver. I know that that's a lot of owner-operators. But if you want to survive the ebb and flow of the freight market, of the economy, of the financial system, you need to have some kind of basic understanding as to what's going on in the world. So best of luck out there. I recommend that you get out there and you run your ass off right now. That's my suggestion. I suspect that there's a lot of drivers that are choosing to sit at home right now because of the high fuel prices. I think that's a bad decision. Get out, run right now. Now is the time to run. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong about all this. I am not a seer. I'm not an oracle. I can't see the future. But just crunching the numbers in my head with my understanding of how things work, I just can't see a scenario where we don't go into a recession. I think a recession is an optimistic outcome. I think I'm being overly optimistic by suggesting that we might only have a recession. We might only have a down freight market. I think that is an overly optimistic assessment. I think things have the potential of getting much, much worse than that. Maybe I'll talk more about some potential dire outcomes in future videos. Maybe a driving video. I'll rant and rave about some possibilities. But I've tried to keep this video focused mainly on hope for the best, like best potential outcome, instead of getting down the rabbit hole of, you know, if this happens and if that happens and if that happens, man, this could cascade into like a Mad Max scenario. Like there is the potential for Mad Max. And nobody knows whether or not that's going to happen because nobody has mapped the global supply chain. And like I said earlier, it's not possible. There's too much corruption, too much fraud, too much criminal activity involved in the global supply chain. It's impossible to map. So, yeah, my recommendation is get out and run your ass off. And keep running your ass off and expect that things are just going to continually get worse. There's not a rainbow a couple miles down the road. Things are likely to just continually get worse and worse and worse. So don't hold out hoping that things are going to get better next month and you're just going to sit at the house this month hoping that next month is going to be better. Next month is most likely going to be worse. So anyway, I could be wrong. You know what? Let's check the news. There's not likely to be any news at 2:30 a.m. But let's check the news real quick. Maybe the war ended. Trump said the war can end any second. Here's the Fox News headline. Trump calls U.S. strikes on Iran a love tap after destroyers targeted in Hormuz Strait. So Trump is downplaying the exchange of missiles, the exchange of fire that we just had with Iran, because we had destroyers in the Strait of Hormuz trying to escort vessels, and also we were interdicting an Iranian flagged ship. I think they fired on us for both of those reasons. And we retaliated. So they're trying to downplay it because they don't want the ceasefire to break. That right there, if you're looking at it from outside perspective, that shows you that Iran doesn't really care about the ceasefire. The United States came in and started doing stuff, and Iran fired on them. And the United States retaliated, defended itself, and then said, not a big deal. Let's keep the ceasefire going. So it shows desperation on the side of the United States of them trying to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And also it shows desperation that they don't want the ceasefire to break. Because the ceasefire broke, and the United States said, no, that doesn't count. That doesn't count. Let's just keep going. That was just a love tap. No big deal. Iran fired at us, but, and we retaliated back, but, no big deal. That's what just happened. So, yeah, that shows that the United States is desperate, and they do not want this ceasefire to break. They don't want hostilities to return. I think that the United States right now is just trying everything that they can. They're looking for some kind of quick fix. They're just trying all kinds of stuff, hoping for a quick fix. And none of it is working. I think eventually we're probably going to have a ground invasion of Iran, but it might not happen for 6 months to a year from now. And oh my goodness, if this supply chain disruption lasts for a year or more, this could get really, really bad. I'm hoping that it's cleared up within the next 2 to 3 months. That's my hope. But it's looking like it's going to take longer than that for the Strait of Hormuz to fully reopen. And then, of course, like I've talked about over and over and over in the video, that's not the only problem. We're also dealing with damage, and not just damage, but some things have been completely destroyed in the oil and gas, infrastructure over there in the Middle East and in Russia. So yeah, my recommendation is get out there, run your ass off right now. And things are likely going to get worse over time. And I think the big breaking point is probably going to be first quarter of next year. And we're probably going to see a massive number of trucking companies going out of business toward the end of the first quarter of next year. So probably around March, April, May, we'll start seeing a lot of stories about trucking companies going out of business. That would be my expectation. But who knows what's going to happen? This is a very complex issue. Nobody fully understands the complexity of it. So I'm just giving my best guess as to what I think is going to happen. So hopefully I'm wrong. Anyway, have a good one. Bye.